Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm M3A1 and in today's video I have a review for you of the brand new Cold War premium tank, the M3A1 Bradley, which is an Era 2 Western Alliance premium light tank, and it is essentially the M3A2 Bradley, which is a Tech Tree Era 3 Western Alliance light tank, dropped down a tier, made into a premium tank with a few nerfs, but I think it works pretty well in Era 2, and we will have a look at the stats and you can tell me what you think in the comments of today's video. So we're going to go over to Excel in just a second, have a look at the stats of the M3A1 Bradley compared to two other Era 2 premium light tanks, as well as a Tech Tree Era 2 light tank. I'll tell you about the stats of all of the vehicles, compare them. We'll talk about the armor or the lack of the armor with the M3A1 Bradley, and also my command and equipment setup, how that affects the stats, and then I have two gameplays for you at the end, and if you want to skip forward to them, they are time stamped in the description of this video. So first off, we're going to have a look at the artwork that WoT Tanks Console have put up on the website of the M3A1 Bradley, and then have a look at the gold price and when you can get this vehicle until. So this is the M3A1 Bradley, as you can see, a very chunky light tank, and you have to be very careful when trying to get around the battlefield with this light tank, as you are a pretty large silhouette with the True Vision system, and although you do have a pretty decent concealment rating, it's not quite as good as the other light tanks in Era 2, and you can be caught out and you're a very big target. In terms of the gold price and when you can get this vehicle, so you can get it from today, the 20th of June, up until the 18th of July, in three different bundles. You have the Ultimate Bundle, the most expensive one, with the equipment, premium time and boosters for 13,750 gold. You have the Loaded Bundle with the premium time and boosters for 11,750 gold, and the tank by itself, which is the one I've gone for, 9,600 gold, which is a reasonable price for an Era 2 premium tank if you like the playstyle and you like what it does on the battlefield. So we're going to head over to the Excel spreadsheet, have a look at the stats of the M3A1 Bradley here on the left, and in this review we're going to be comparing the stats of the Bradley to the AMX-13 SS11 TCA, which is my favourite Era 2 premium light tank. It's a French light tank. This also has a primary gun as well as an auto-loading ATGM launcher. We're also going to be comparing to the Cobra Arctic Hiss. Again, it's an independent Alliance Era 2 premium light tank with a primary gun and an ATGM launcher. And also we're going to be comparing to the BMP2 here on the right, which is the Tech Tree Eastern Alliance Era 2 light tank, just to give an indication of how the stats of the Bradley holds up to a Tech Tree vehicle. So if you haven't seen any of my reviews before or tank comparisons and you're wondering about the colour coding, green's the best stat, red's the worst, and orange is somewhere in between, and the ones highlighted in yellow are updated with my command and equipment setup, and we'll get on to that as we go through the video, I should say. In terms of the Silver XP and Commander bonus, we're going to start with them. So the Bradley has a 50% Silver bonus, which is the worst in this comparison, with the Arctic Hiss coming out on top at 65%, and combined with this 50%, if you choose to use the premium ATGMs, which cost 6 times as much, roughly, as the regular ATGMs, you sometimes don't make as big a profit as you would wish with this vehicle, so that's something to take into consideration. And the AMX-13 in the middle there with 55% silver bonus. So not the biggest silver bonus, but you do have the biggest XP bonus at 25%, better than the other two vehicles. And in terms of the Commander bonus, 10%, the same as the Arctic Hiss, and only 5% off of the AMX-13. Now we're going to start getting into the raw stats of these vehicles, and you can obviously screenshot this and take a moment to have a look at all the stats, because I know there is a lot on the screen here, but I'll do my best to explain as we go through. So over here on the left, the stats of the M3A1 Bradley, you have 2,300 hit points, which is the same as the AMX-13, and it's 100 less than the Arctic Hiss, and the Tech Tree only has 50 more hit points, so that's around the right level for an Era 2 light tank, but you can get taken out very quickly. That's not too many hit points when there are ATGMs flying around in Era 2, and these autocannons can be very deadly against you as you don't have any armour, so try and make those last the whole battle if you can. Next, in terms of the view range, 520 meters view range, which is the worst in this comparison, only by a little bit, and you can boost that up if you use things like food and situational awareness and advanced optics. I don't do that for reasons I will discuss as we get to my commander and equipment setup, so not the best view range, but it's decent enough to be able to get forwards and do some spotting for yourself. Next, we have the steel concealment rating, and I don't have the base steel concealment rating of all of these vehicles, but I do have the updated steel concealment values with my commander and equipment setup applied, and as you can see here with the Bradley, it has the worst concealment out of all of these vehicles. The best would go to the AMX-13, which is my favourite because it is so sneaky. It's not too far off the Arctic Hiss and the BMP2, but yeah, it has got the worst concealment out of all of these light tanks, and with that large silhouette, you definitely want to make sure you are trying to take advantage of hard cover and the terrain and make that your friend during the battle. Next, we're going to go on to the mobility of all of these vehicles. In terms of the M3A1 Bradley, a 500 engine horsepower, a power to weight ratio of 25.04, you can go 61.2 kilometers an hour forwards, 28.9 kilometers an hour in reverse, and you have 48 degrees a second hold reverse and 60 degrees a second turret reverse. So in terms of the engine power, not the best, not the worst in this comparison, and that applies to the power to weight as well. The best goes to the Cobra Arctic Hiss, or if we're including the tech tree, the BMP2, but it's still a pretty decent power to weight and much better than the AMX-13, so that is a bonus. But you do have the worst top forward speed at 61.2 kilometers an hour, so you might want to think about using the traction system and the advanced powertrain to boost that up as much as possible, so other light tanks don't beat you to the important locations and they don't run rings around you during the battle. In terms of the reverse speed, it's not the best, not the worst in this comparison. The best goes to the Arctic Hiss. It's more than enough, especially if you use mobility equipment with your commander and equipment setup. In terms of your traverse speeds, as you can see here, you have the best, I should say, hull and turret traverse, so you're very nimble. When you do get up to top speed, you can try and evade fire, but you are a pretty chunky light tank, as we have already discussed. But your turret does snap around pretty quickly with 60 degrees a second, much quicker than the other vehicles in this comparison, so you were able to get your turret around quickly, get those ATGMs off, and get your primary 25mm autocannon off as well. So a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of the mobility. The fact that you are pretty chunky and you don't have the best top forward speed, you have the worst in this comparison, and a mediocre power to weight for a light tank can cause you some trouble, so definitely invest in improving your mobility with the M3A1 Bradley. So in terms of the firepower then of the Bradley, and this is where it gets interesting for all of these vehicles, the M3A1 Bradley has a 25mm auto cannon, which is capable of dealing 4,500 damage, but it takes 44.7 seconds to get all of these rounds out because you have 150 rounds per clip with an interclip reload of 0.3 seconds, and your damage is 30. You have two types of ammunition with your 25mm autocannon. You have APF SDS as standard and HE as your secondary ammunition choice. And then you also have an ATGM twin cannon tow launcher, so it fires 2 per magazine, not the 4 that was previously advertised over the weekend. That has been updated today. Obviously it's received a slight nerf before it has been released today into World of Tanks console, so you only have 2 shots per clip with the ATGM launcher, and that is capable of dealing 2,200 damage in 12 seconds. You have 2 shots per clip and an interclip reload of 12 seconds. I just thought I'd make that clear before we go any further. So in terms of the 25mm autocannon, as we've discussed, 150 rounds per clip for this 25mm autocannon. The standard rounds go at 1,385 meters a second, so the fastest in this comparison, and that is pretty decent if you want to try and fire at mid to long range, but you are going to have to be sat there giving away your position for a long time to be able to get any substantial damage out. But for finishing low health targets, this definitely can help, and up close and personal it can help when you're auto locking on someone, trying to run around them. You'll go, and including your good turret traverse speed, it should be able to lock on and hit most of your targets in close quarters combat. You also have the best shell velocity in terms of your HE rounds, so if you wanted to use some of them, of course that is a bonus. In terms of the penetration for your 30 average damage per shell, 150, which is the worst in this comparison, and you also have the worst HE due to the fact it's such a small caliber at 65mm of penetration for 50 damage with your 25mm auto cannon. When we compare to the other vehicles in this comparison, you can see the AMX-13 has a 75mm with 6 shots per clip, capable of dealing 1080 damage in a lot less, 10 seconds, and the Arctic Hiss doesn't have an autoloader. It has a single shot 90mm gun with 240 alpha damage, so it's kind of comparable, the M3A1 Bradley, to the BMP2, which has a 30mm autocannon but 15 average damage, so half as good as the M3A1 Bradley, but you do have the option of firing 170mm of premium APF SDS with the BMP2, whereas you only have one option with the Bradley along with the HE. So that's it for the 25mm autocannon, 4,500 damage in 44.7 seconds, a long time to get your clip out. And as you can see, the BMP2, 3,000 damage in 21.89 seconds, so a lot quicker. Next, the ATGM twin launcher for the M3A1 Bradley, 2,200 damage in 12 seconds. You have two different flavors of ATGM, your regular and your premium, and the long and short of it, the premium is just miles better in every regard, and most people, I would assume, will be just taking full premium ATGM. So your regular ATGM's 296 meters a second shell velocity, which is the joint best in this comparison. And yeah, that is a pretty average speed for an ATGM. And if you want to bump that up just by a little bit, you choose the premium version for 329 meters a second. So you can see what Wargaming are thinking there, making the premium ATGMs just so much more enticing. In terms of your regular ATGM penetration, 630, which is not quite as good as the best, which is the AMX-13 at 660, but only by a little bit, and much better than the other two in this comparison, and 10 more than the BMP2, and that's for 1,100 damage per shot. In terms of the premium ATGM's 800mm penetration, so it jumps up by a whole lot, 170mm more penetration, same alpha damage, 1,100. The best alpha damage on any ATGM in this comparison goes to the MX-13 at 1,210, whereas the BMP2 has 990, and the Cobra Arctic Hiss, the same as the Bradley, 1,100. So that's your twin launcher there. Now we can go on to the gun handling and DPM, and that will finish the raw stats of this comparison. So in terms of the Bradley's 25mm autocannon, as we have discussed, 150 rounds per clip, 4,500 damage in 44.7 seconds. You have a 2.1 second aim time, which is not the best, not the worst in this comparison, somewhere in between, but you have a pretty horrific accuracy. So that great shell velocity means nothing when you're very, very inaccurate, so you're going to want to take some gun handling skills on your commander and equipment setup to boost that up and get that value down. That is the worst in this comparison by some way, the best being the AMX-13 at 0.32 accuracy. The DPM with this 25mm autocannon, 3,567, which is actually the best DPM by a little bit over the BMP2, which is the tech tree version, and much better than the two other premium tanks in this comparison. It takes 31 seconds to load your 150 rounds, As I've discussed, your interclip reload 0.3 second, and you can carry 1500 rounds. So yeah, plenty of rounds to last the battle. You have 9 degrees of gun depression and 59 degrees of gun elevation, the best in both regards, and that gun elevation can come in handy when you're trying to shoot up at targets that are above you, and other tanks can only dream of that. The AMX-13, my favourite premium era 2 light tank, only has 13 degrees, and that's very awkward when you're going down a slope and trying to shoot at people that are above you. So good news there for the M3A1 Bradley. Next, we're going to go on to the ATGM, DPM, and the reload. So the DPM for the 2-shot ATGM autoloader is 2,541, and the base reload for the 2 ATGMs is 40 seconds. I had to go back and double check and just start this bit again, as it shows 45 seconds still on the article on the website, and it also shows the DPM as a little bit higher. So these are the correct figures for the ATGM autoloader. Interclip reload, as we discussed, 12 seconds, and ammo capacity 24 ATGM. So in terms of DPM, you do have the lowest DPM out of this comparison if we're not taking into consideration the BMP2. The reload somewhere in between. Interclip reload pretty damn long, but not as long as the 15 seconds on the AMX-13, and 24 ATGMs, which is the best in this comparison. And for long drawn out games, the Bradley does keep you with a nice stack of ATGMs going. So yeah, a bit of a mixed bag there for the M3A1 Bradley. I'm going to talk you through now my commander and equipment setup, and then I'll talk you through the armour of this tank very briefly, as there is hardly any armour to this tank. Then we will get stuck into the 2 gameplay. So in terms of what equipment I run on the Bradley, I run the advanced concealment, I run the advanced powertrain, and the traction system. And in terms of what commander skills I run on the Bradley, I run Sixth Sense, Born Leader, Rapid Loading, Camouflage Expertise, Muffled Shot, Green Thumb, Steady Aim, Snapshot, and Run and Gun. So in terms of my commander skills, Sixth Sense and Born Leader is standard. Rapid Loading to help the DPM out of the ATGM autoloader and the primary 25mm autocannon. Then I run 3 concealment perks to get this concealment down as much as possible. And then I run Steady Aim, Snapshot, and Run and Gun to help the accuracy, because it's very, very bad on the 25mm autocannon. And in terms of my equipment, I'm running the mobility equipment, both pieces, so I can keep up with the other light tanks. And because you're such a large target, to try and evade fire, and advanced concealment, again, to get that concealment down to a pretty good level. So in terms of what that's done to the stats of the M3A1 Bradley, these are the stats here highlighted in yellow. It's brought my view range from 520 to 542 meters, which isn't the best, but I felt like the other stats were worth investing in more. And it's brought my concealment down to 202 meters, which, as you can see, is still worse than the other tanks in this comparison. So you have got less concealment and you are more visible. Take that into consideration, but you can still outspot quite a lot of other medium and heavy tanks and other light tanks that don't have great command and equipment setups, things like that. In terms of the mobility, as we're using both pieces of mobility equipment, that's going to improve dramatically. It's improved my engine power to 525 horsepower. My power to weight has gone from 25.04 to 26.29. Top forward speed 61.2 to 70.69 kilometers an hour. Reverse speed 28.9 kilometers an hour to 33.38 kilometers an hour, and that hold reverse has gone up to 52.8 degrees a second, and that turret reverse to a massive 62.58 degrees a second. So a massive boost in terms of the mobility, and this is what I think I was trying to go for, trying to keep up with the other light tanks, trying to run rings around medium and heavy tanks and avoid getting rammed by them, and you can use that in conjunction with the boosted concealment that we have. In terms of the firepower of the Bradley with my commander and equipment setup, in terms of the 25mm autocannon, my aim time's dropped to 2.01 seconds from 2.1, and that horrific accuracy has gone from 0.39 to 0.33. Just bear in mind it still has a pretty poor accuracy during movement, so yeah, you're not going to be hitting many of these rounds, but you do have plenty of them to fire at your opponents. If you manage to penetrate every single one of your rounds, my DPM's gone to 3,795 with this 25mm autocannon, and the reload for the 150 rounds, 26.45 seconds. Lastly, in terms of the ATGM, it's gone from 2,541 DPM to 2,860, and a 40-second reload for the 2 shots, or the 2 ATGMs, down to 34.13 seconds. So that's it in terms of the stats of the Bradley. A bit of a mixed bag, some pretty decent concealment and mobility if you invest in your equipment and commander setup looking at those stats. Your ATGM firepower, very dangerous. Primary 25mm autocannon, very hard to get to work, but sort of really close up against lightly armoured tanks in the rear and sides, you should be golden. Gun handling, kind of irrelevant on the 25mm because this thing's all about those ATGMs, but it is good to know, of course. So lastly, let's talk about the armour. I won't show you any screenshots, I'll just tell you very, very briefly about the armour of this vehicle, then we'll get stuck into the gameplay. So the front of the turret, the twin turbo launcher, do not take that. That is not a hitbox. You cannot shoot that and damage the vehicle. But the actual front of the turret with the 25mm gun attached is 50mm. The side of the tank is 38mm, which means you can side scrape against really low, sort of lower caliber rounds. However, it's not great for side scraping, and you're not going to want to be doing that in a light tank anyway. And that 38mm also applies to the front hull, the upper plate of the M3A1 Bradley, so very easy to be penetrated by ATGMs, any kind of round, even HE and HESH ammunition. And that's pretty much all you need to know. Apart from there is a 25mm sort of spaced armour section across the lower plate, upper plate, and the side skirts of this vehicle, but it doesn't protect against much, and a lot of things are going to penetrate you very easily indeed, especially autocannons can shred you because you're such a large target and you don't have any armor. In terms of what you want to do about the lack of armor, you're basically just going to be using your mobility, using the terrain to your advantage, trying to get out of harm's way. You're not going to be relying on ricocheting, and if you invest in your concealment, you can still outspot your medium and heavy tanks. So that's it for the stats review of the M3A1 Bradley. We are now going to head into the first of 2 gameplays to demonstrate how this vehicle performs. So I'll see you over in the first gameplay shortly. So we are now into the first gameplay of today's video, and we are on Dezful in the M3A1 Bradley. We're in a standard battle, and right off the bat you can get a nice indication of the mobility of this vehicle. And remember, this is with the mobility equipment, both pieces, the advanced powertrain and also the traction system, so it would be a lot slower if I did not have those 2 pieces of equipment. You can see that we're kind of keeping up with the rest of the battle, and that's the reason why I wanted to improve the mobility of this vehicle, because it would just feel really sluggish. And being a larger, chunkier light tank, as you can see, we're kind of the size of a medium, maybe even some of the smaller heavy tanks in Era 2. You definitely want to have that mobility and also improve your concealment to use on the maps where there are more open spaces, bushes, that kind of thing. So we've come to this middle section here. We have some support, and we're just going to find some unsuspecting enemies to ambush with our twin launcher ATGM autoloader. So we found this Ignis Purgatio there. While he has fired, we are going to put a shell right into the rear of him for 1090 damage, just 10 shy of the average damage roll in this vehicle. And then we are reloaded again with another ATGM pretty quickly. It doesn't feel too long, something like the AMX-13, and yeah, we managed to get a nice ammo rack there on the MOBA, and yeah, we are already up to 2690 damage, and this vehicle does this very frequently in terms of the ammo racks and critical damage. Because you're such a high alpha damage ATGM, you really can put the hurt on your enemies. You can damage the crew, damage the module, set people on fire, and I've had about 5 ammo racks in a very short session in the M3A1 Bradley. So yeah, it's definitely a good vehicle for that, and it's very fun when that happens. So we've now come back up into this section here. You saw me firing the autocannon there, and because we haven't improved the gun handling as good as we could, we've invested in the mobility and the concealment. You can see it was sort of all over the place really. When you're firing the 25mm autocannon, if you have the same setup as me, going for mobility and concealment, it's not the best. It really is for those last gasp rounds, trying to get it into people to be able to finish them off, finish low health targets, and also combat other light tanks that don't have good armor. So we're now firing right into the side and rear of this Leopard 2 AV, and we managed to get a few rounds in there, as well as an ATGM into him, and we're on the reload again. And what's great about this vehicle is that you do have those 24 ATGMs per battle, so longer drawn out battles, this tank does very well indeed. You can be caught out when you're like this and you're reloading, so you have to use your mobility and your knowledge of the maps and terrain to try and get around and avoid taking fire whilst you are reloading, because although you do have that primary 25mm autocannon, it really doesn't save you in a lot of situations. And if a heavy tank that's quick will come after you, they are going to be able to absolutely wreck you. You're a big target, easy to hit, auto-aimed shots are going to hit you more often than not. And yeah, you definitely have to think about your map awareness, where you're on the map, where you have teammates, and if you're isolated when you're reloading, do what I'm doing now. Pop your smoke consumable, because I use the enhanced smoke screen to improve the concealment, but also to get away like this. Join up with your allies whilst you are reloading. Maybe do a little bit of scouting, but do not get caught out whilst you're reloading, and especially whilst you are reloading both your 25mm autocannon and your ATGM twin tube tow launcher. So now we have reloaded again only 34 seconds. Well, I say only 34 seconds. It would be a lot longer if we didn't improve that with our commander and equipment setup. And that 12-second intraclip reload doesn't feel absolutely awful, because these ATGMs do deal a heck of a lot of damage. So we drive like a complete pillock, nearly flip ourselves, and now we're picking our next targets. There's an M50 Ontos and also an FE4211. Just biding my time, waiting for the right moment, trying to make sure they are engaged with someone else, go in, take out these 2 tanks, and then we can go off and reload and find our next 2 targets. So we come up behind this M50 Ontos, was thinking about just using the autocannon, and it's definitely a tank I could take out with the autocannon, but we have enough there to be able to use the ATGM, and now we can just get behind this FE4211. He turns to face us, and we can finish him off with our second ATGM, and that's what's good about this tank, coming in for those ambush situations. There are lots of other Era 2 premium light tanks that can do exactly the same thing, but it still is fun nonetheless, and these ATGMs are very dangerous. This tank feels very sort of balanced for Era 2. I think it fits in nicely. It's not my preferred choice, I'll say that right now. I prefer still the AMX-13 SS11 TCA due to the fact it's got so much better concealment. You do have still some very nasty ATGMs, and the primary cannon, although not great, is still better, I believe, than this 25mm gun, which is kind of just like a showpiece on this tank, just for something up close and personal. But yeah, that's really my thoughts on it during the first gameplay. It can be a lot of fun, but it can be frustrating when you are caught out reloading, and when faster tanks are able to get to you, faster light tanks that have better DPM and are able to just pen you every time with ease, because you have such a massive silhouette. So we come over here in this battle here in Dezful, we put one ATGM into the Maguk 5 there. We completely whiffed the second. I'm not quite sure what happened there. Maybe we got too close to the Maguk 5. But we have this 25mm autocannon, and at this distance, this is where it really comes in clutch. We managed to defend the base, and we pick up our 4th kill, up to 8.5k direct damage, 351 assistance, and 920 blocked from an lower caliber round, I would imagine. So we make a profit there with a premium account of 132,000 without just shy of 50,000, because we're using solely the better ATGMs. It's just my choice. But yeah, a pretty decent game there on Dezful in 6 minutes 37 seconds, 8.5k damage, and it's definitely capable of dealing some very nasty damage with those ATGMs. You just have to watch out for your downtime when you're reloading, and also keep aware of your map awareness. So 8.9k combined there on Dezful. We're now going to head on into the second gameplay of today's video. So we're now into the second gameplay of today's video, and we are here on Alamein in the M3A1 Bradley once again. And I'd just like to touch upon what I was talking about in the previous game. As you can see, I do run just the premium ATGMs. They are 6,000 silver each, around 6 times higher than the standard ammunition, and that's completely up to you. The more of these, the less silver you are going to use, but I find you still make a pretty nice ton of silver, and this tank for me is more about the fun aspect using those ATGMs. There are much better tanks to make silver in Era 2, and yeah, that's just my opinion. And with that lower silver bonus, I think this is more of a collector's tank, more of a tank for people that like the Bradley, maybe like the historical aspect of the vehicle, and who just like to play around with different tanks once in a while. But we've got ourselves here into a pretty bad situation right off the bat here at Alamein, getting forward, and the Ignis Pagacio is coming round after us. But we now have a tank destroyer friend, and we're going to come and see if we can get an ATGM into this medium tank, and we're going to make sure we aim up ahead because of the slow shell velocity of ATGMs, and fortunately we get a beautiful ammo rack there right into the side for over 2,000 damage. And now we are fighting a BMP2, the Eastern Alliance Tech Tree Era 2 light tank that we reviewed with the M3A1 Bradley, and I believe there we got another ammo rack. So our second ammo rack, 2 ATGMs, 2 ammo racks, up to 2 kills, 3.1k damage in the first couple of minutes of this battle. And now we're just waiting in the downtime behind this destructible cover, waiting to ambush our next target. We do have the option of going in with our 25mm autocannon, but sometimes it's better just to wait for your ATGMs and use the autocannon to finish the tank off, because if you go in thinking you're going to be penetrating a lot of rounds with this 25mm, you're going to be very much mistaken. It's against lightly armoured targets that are on low health. You definitely don't want to be going in and thinking you can finish off a heavy tank with ease with that 25mm autocannon. So we're going to go for another ATGM. Oh, and yeah, that's our third ATGM, third ammo rack. So type 82 back to the garage. I must have been activating the community ambassador RNG there, which definitely isn't a thing. But yeah, a very lucky game so far. But these kind of things happen with such a good ATGM launcher. This tank's all about the ATGMs, and yeah, it does things like that. And when it works like this, it's a heck of a lot of fun. So there's a Conqueror now, our next victim. He is got his back turned to us. We put one into his tracks, track him in place. We're getting some tracking, and we can use this 25mm now to finish him off. And that's how you want to play this vehicle. That's what you want to do with it. Close quarters combat like we're doing here against this armadillo. Make sure you free aim as much as possible. Try and give a bit of lead and try and ward them off with your 25mm. Wait for your ATGMs to reload, and then you rinse and repeat. Go in again, and yeah, have a lot of fun. But it's a very fun vehicle. If you've got any kind of vehicle that I've discussed in the review today, I'd say unless you really like the look of this vehicle and you're a collector and you play a lot, it's probably not worth it. But it's still pretty decent. It's definitely not overpowered. I think it's quite well balanced. So we have now reloaded our 2 ATGMs into this twin tube tow launcher again, and now we're going to be trying to find another victim to take out in this battle. The M50 on toss comes across, and we manage to take him out there. That looked like it might have been another ammo rack as we send Yeah, a pretty interesting name there, back to the garage. And we have a second ATGM only 12 seconds later, but we do lag that a little bit behind, I should say. And now we switch to our 25mm, just in case anyone comes at us whilst we spend a bit of time reloading and then advancing. Again, our base is under threat, so I'm going to use the mobility that we have boosted to go back, defend the base. We are capping and we are capped first, so we should win regardless, but I'm going to try and defend the base anyway, just in case someone makes it back to our capture circle. And yeah, I think the setup that I've got really works well for me, improving the concealment and the mobility for this vehicle. The gun handling of the 25mm is kind of neither here nor there. Like I said, all about those ATGMs, and yeah, you will have a pretty good time. So it's a T55 Enigma that is capping. Unfortunately, he's facing at us with his strongest part of his armor. I'm trying to go through the little slit there in his turret, and fortunately we managed to do so. We take him out, and now an RDF LT is coming after us. We put some rounds in to ward him off with our 25mm. We are now a one shot for anyone on the battlefield. We throw our smoke up, and now we're just trying to hopefully get one more ATGM in this battle and hopefully pick up a top gun. Trying to evade fire from this T55 Enigma. I'm not quite sure where this RDF LT is. We're going to juke like we're running away, then come back in and hopefully get an ATGM into this T55 Enigma. Unbeknownst to me, a sneakier tank will have the last laugh on me, I'm afraid, in this battle, and takes me out from the side, and that's showing you one of the major drawbacks. You are a bigger target, people are sneakier than you, and unless you're not careful, you can be taken out very quickly. But yeah, a lot of fun with the ATGMs. Make a nice profit there in this game. 5 kills, 8.3k direct damage. That's a high caliber and only a second class show, and people are playing this tank very well indeed on the first day. 8.3k direct damage, 570 assistance. And yeah, final thoughts. One for the collectors, I believe. Pretty balanced. Very fun with the ATGMs, but there are sneakier tanks that I would say are more easier to play if you set up correctly and have pretty good map knowledge. But a nice 8.9k combined damage game there on Alamein to show you what this thing is capable of. And I hope you enjoyed today's review, or at least found it informative. Let me know in the comments below, and give this video a like. It would really help me out. And until next time, I will see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.